Hello, it's Dr. Cindy with this week's Mental Health Moment. Several years ago, I was having a crown put on one of my teeth. After the dentist had been working for a while, my jaw began to hurt from keeping it open for so long. I was sure that at any moment she would stop and give me a break so I could close my mouth for a little bit, but she kept right on working and the pain grew stronger and stronger. I contemplated raising my hand to get her attention, but I really didn't want to interrupt her, so I decided to try an experiment. Rather than lying there continuing to think about how much pain I was in and how miserable I felt, I decided to change my thoughts to see if that could improve my experience of the situation. So I started telling myself in my head, "This is awesome. This is the best time I've ever had." Well, within 2 or 3 iterations of that, the pain went away and I was able to make it through the entire rest of the procedure without any discomfort. I was both surprised and incredibly relieved that my experiment worked. This is one example of how powerful our thoughts are over how we feel, both physically and emotionally. And given that many of our thoughts are verbal, it is also an example of how much influence words have, both on ourselves and on others. As part of an anti-bullying demonstration, IKEA took 2 houseplants and installed them at a school within separate glass cases so they could be observed over time. One plant was exposed to continual recorded messages of positive, loving words, while the other was exposed to negative, insulting words and statements. At the end of the 30 days, the plant that received the positive messages was healthy and thriving, while the one subjected to harsh words was droopy with brown leaves. Now, while this seems to be a dramatic visual demonstration of the power of hurtful words, some people have criticized this type of anti-bullying effort. One writer in Psychology Today insisted that students who use insulting words don't see themselves as being bullying, so are not inclined to change their behavior even after being educated about it. He also said teaching students about hurtful words promotes fragility, as it gives more power to those words rather than empowering students to learn not to react to them. I have a little bit different take on this. I believe children are very aware of the impact that words can have on their peers, and that teaching them that words hurt isn't counterproductive, it just isn't sufficient for addressing the problem. I think hurtful words are chosen and used precisely because of their potential to cause harm with the intention of upsetting the other person and making them feel badly. Kids know that words can be used as weapons, and while I certainly agree that children and adults alike could benefit from learning how to more effectively cope with hurtful and hateful speech so it doesn't affect them so much emotionally, it is important to also acknowledge that words are not neutral because we have attached meaning and significance to them. As a result, they do have the power to elicit both enjoyable and challenging feelings. In fact, research has shown that verbal abuse in childhood causes observable effects on the brain and has just as strong of an impact on the brain and on mental health as do physical and sexual abuse, with particular implications for depression, anxiety, and dissociation. I worked with a teenage girl once who developed a severe eating disorder after repeatedly being called fat by a boy in her class. When this behavior started, she was not overweight by any means, but being singled out and targeted with that word caused her to believe that about herself. And she began to restrict her eating so she would lose weight. Part of my work with her was helping her recognize that the boy chose that word not because it was a true and accurate descriptor of her body size, but because fat is probably one of the most hurtful words someone could use against a female. So the boy said it specifically because he knew it would bother her, not because he thought she was fat. And while we tend to be most sensitive to words that resonate with our own insecurities that we already have about ourselves, any overt insult or implied criticism has the potential to cause us to feel self-conscious and doubt ourselves. It is challenging not to take other people's comments and opinions to heart when they suggest something negative about us. We all want to feel accepted, appreciated, and valued. So perceived criticism registers as a threat to that and can make us feel insecure, inadequate, unworthy, and rejected. Now, I've spoken extensively in previous videos about how our perceptions of ourselves and the extent to which we feel worthy and deserving of love forms very early on through our interactions and experiences growing up. This then forms the basis for how we perceive, interpret, and react to social situations and relationships as adults. When an external interaction sets off a challenging internal reaction, it activates whatever painful past experiences it resonates with and can take us right back mentally and emotionally to those earlier times in our life. So when we perceive or receive criticism, it taps into those insecurities and feelings of inadequacy that we developed when we were young. Just as the words that others use with us can affect us emotionally, so too can and do the words that we use with ourselves. If you have trouble believing this, reflect on a time when you were faced with a task that felt difficult and you told yourself, "Oh, I can't do this." You likely then felt stressed, overwhelmed, inept, and defeated as you tried to give up for the challenge. Now remember a similar scenario when you thought, "I can do this." In that case, you probably felt uplifted, energized, motivated, inspired, and ready to tackle the project. We are in charge of our brains, not the other way around. So if we take control, our brains will follow our lead. If we abdicate control, our brains will revert back to the default mode of habitual, patterned ways of thinking, perceiving, and feeling based on that programmed narrative from our past. And considering we have between 50 to 80,000 thoughts a day, which is about 2,100 to 3,300 thoughts per hour, there's a lot of potential there to either make ourselves feel pretty good or cause ourselves to feel really bad. Our brain is very busy, and most of us experience some type of running commentary going through our head throughout the day, in addition to the unconscious thoughts that operate behind the scenes to affect how we perceive and respond to our daily experiences. Sometimes our stream of thought can be background noise as we attend to the various activities and tasks. Other times, our thoughts are more front and center, demanding us to pay attention to them and what they have to say. Many of our thoughts are automatic, so bringing to our conscious awareness the ones that generate negative feelings about ourselves is an important starting point for trying to change our mental vocabulary. If we are willing to sit down and spend some time exploring and observing what is on our mind, it can give us information about the context of the messages that flash across the screen, which in turn gives us the opportunity to challenge and correct them. As with any habit, the more we recognize the circumstances and contexts within which self-critical thoughts are most likely to occur, the better able we will be to either prevent that from happening altogether or at least interrupt the process when it begins. I recommend regularly setting aside time to delve into thoughts and feelings that make you feel poorly about yourself as a way to explore and heal the painful messages and negative self-assessments that were developed and internalized as a child. This includes writing down any thoughts that come to mind that are judgmental, self-critical, or otherwise negative. These reflect not only aspects of yourself that you may have difficulty facing and accepting, but also can give a sense of the words that you tend to use for self-reference. Remember, the problem isn't that you are inadequate, unworthy, unlovable, or whatever other painful thoughts arise. The problem is that you believe you are those things, and if left unchecked, those beliefs will continue to play out in your mind as an ongoing narrative that affects your feelings about yourself and your reactions to interactions with others. As you record your thoughts, write them down in their raw, unfiltered form as much as possible, and try not to sugarcoat or alter them in any way. It might feel harsh to see these words on paper, but that's exactly the reason why it is so important to identify them. If challenging feelings arise, allow yourself your sadness or anger or hurt. These are a sign that you're on the right track with uncovering thoughts that cause you pain. Comfort yourself through the challenging emotions. And when nothing else comes to mind, put the list away to add to at another time. Make sure you go back to that list to write down self-critical thoughts that come up during times when you're feeling upset. Close each writing session by putting your hand on your heart, taking some deep breaths, and exhaling any residual emotions from your body. Once you have accumulated 10 to 20 self-critical statements, take some time to read them over and notice how you feel. Then for each one, ask yourself, is this something I would say about someone that I deeply love? Try to imagine saying that to a person that is very special to you. How does that feel? And how might they feel if you were to say those words to them? I suggest that anything on your list that you would not want to say to a loved one is also not appropriate to think or say to yourself. You are a loved one too, and it is important to treat yourself accordingly. Look for any patterns that stand out among the words that you used. What are the themes? These can give you a sense of the core vulnerability or sensitivity that is tied in with the negative messages. Can you feel compassion for the younger version of you who decided that about themselves? The one who thought they were inadequate or unworthy or undeserving of love? Every critical statement is likely an offshoot of one of those feelings. So if the thought is, I'm so stupid, the feeling is inadequacy. If the thought is, nobody cares about me, the feeling is being undeserving of love. It is important to identify the underlying emotions because those are where the negative thoughts originated. Write the feeling down next to the self-critical thought to help focus you away from the hurtful words and onto the painful emotion. The next step is to take a fresh paper and write down the things you would like to say to yourself and the ways that you would like to think about yourself based on those underlying vulnerabilities. Imagine speaking to yourself as you would to a dear friend. Write down what you would tell a loved one who is feeling rejected, unloved, unworthy, or ashamed. Those are the new words that you will use for yourself whenever self-critical thoughts arise. Be sure to write your new statements in a way that supports the positive qualities and attributes rather than an opposing counterpoint to the self-critical one. For example, if you're struggling to get into the jeans that you just took out of the dryer and you find yourself thinking, oh, I'm so fat, the replacement isn't, I'm not fat. Our subconscious mind doesn't register negative, so that statement would still resonate as I'm fat. And your conscious mind will be tempted if you say, I'm not fat, to counter with, well, yes, you are. And the last thing you want to create is a yes, you are, no, I'm not battle within your brain. Also, you're not going to say, I'm skinny as an alternative to I'm fat, I'm so fat, because if you frame the statement at the opposite extreme of the original thought, you're just going to feel like you're lying to yourself. And here's where understanding the underlying emotion is so important. I'm so fat or stupid or ugly or fill in the blank are all code for feeling unworthy and unlovable. So your antidote to I'm so fat could be I am loved no matter what size I am, or I am lovable no matter what my body looks like. Then whenever a self-critical thought comes in again, connect to your heart and to the hurt feeling that has been triggered. Comfort yourself through the feeling and substitute in the healing and supportive statements that you've come up with. One self-critical word I hear a lot is needy. People often use this as a judgment against themselves when they are feeling sad, lonely, and unloved, and are wishing someone would help them feel better. They reject these feelings as being needy, as if they somehow shouldn't feel that way and that there's something wrong with them because they do. And the shame they have about having those feelings makes them reluctant to seek the very thing that could provide relief, comfort, and support from others, and love and compassion for themselves. The stigma around being needy stems back to unhealthy conditioning around emotions. We are taught directly and indirectly that our feelings are too much or inappropriate or upsetting for other people. So we reject them when we feel them and we reject ourselves for having them. When we feel hungry, we don't shame and scold ourselves for wanting and needing food. And when we see someone else trying to take care of their hunger, we don't roll our eyes in judgment and say, oh, look at them looking for food. Yet how often do we disparage ourselves and other people for just wanting attention as if that's not a basic human need? Our emotional needs are just as valid and important as our physical ones and just as worthy of our time, care, and attention. So when you think I'm so needy, I encourage you to replace needy with needing and connect to the vulnerable, hurting part of you that is wanting to be honored and taken care of. So in response to I'm too needy, you might say, oh, I am needing. I am needing love and comfort right now. That's okay. I'm feeling really sad and alone. So of course I want someone to help me feel better. In addition to coming up with healing alternatives to your typical self-critical thoughts, it can be helpful to create a list of positive affirmations that you use to start your day and end your day. These are like vitamins for the mind, a dose of emotionally nutritious statements that you regularly infuse into your brain. Again, you want to make these statements ones that you feel able to believe about yourself, not superlatives that aren't really true for anyone. So, for example, I'm the smartest person in the world is not a viable affirmation, but I am capable, I am competent, I do good work, I am good at my job, all are good affirmations. And consider more general statements around being loved, enough, deserving, valued. Spend some time feeling out the words so you select the ones that resonate positively for you. There is no master list that applies to everyone. This is your personal list based on what feels good to you. When you use these affirmations, make sure you are connecting to the emotional experience that goes with them. Otherwise, you run the risk of them being just more words out of the many that your brain is bombarded with every day. Saying words out loud gives them more power, so it would be great to speak your affirmations rather than just thinking them in your head. That way, they are less likely to get lost among those thousands of other thoughts your brain is trying to manage. And because the spoken word has such power, take care with the language you use when talking about yourself and your life to others. These are announcements you are making to the world. When talking about a challenging situation, people often say, "Oh, this is killing me." That is not an idea you want to give energy to. It is much better to say, "This is feeling really hard," which is an appropriate expression of an emotional experience you're having. One of my pet peeves is when someone says, "I will never get over that," or "I can't ever forgive him." That's essentially imposing a life sentence on yourself to perpetually live in emotional pain. Similarly, saying, "I wouldn't be able to handle that" about a possible hardship in the future dooms you to live in fear about that potential situation and gives it a power over you that is not helpful. Don't commit yourself to not being able to cope with something. The reality is we can and do handle difficult and challenging and painful things, so we do a disservice to ourselves when we underestimate our capacity to do so and declare that there are some things we would not be able to handle. One last way that you can use words to your advantage is to make a point of praising yourself for the positive things you do. We are so quick to criticize our mistakes and perceived shortcomings and often don't give ourselves credit for our accomplishments and successes. This is especially important to do for tasks that feel challenging. If you're trying to establish an exercise routine, then make a point of telling yourself, "Nice job," after you've completed your workout. Also, if you're having trouble motivating to go to the gym because you're thinking, "Oh, I don't want to go," rather than trying to fight against your resistance, sit with it and work on it. Ask yourself what's going on and see what comes to you. It might be, "I'm too tired," or "It's so much work." Then respond as you would, again, to a dear friend or family member who was struggling with this issue. You might say, "Oh, I know it's feeling hard. You would really rather stay home. I also know you're really wanting to get into a solid routine, and following through on this is really important. I know you can do this, and you're going to feel so proud of yourself when you're done." As you contemplate the things I have suggested today, it might seem strange to focus on talking to yourself, but the reality is you're already talking to yourself constantly through the thoughts that come up in your mind throughout the day. So that is why it's so important to look at changing the ones that are hurtful or unhelpful for you. Just as you are what you eat, you are also what you think. If you continue to allow that old program narrative to dictate your thoughts about yourself, you will likely struggle with critical and judgmental reactions that continue to make you feel bad. But if you are willing to consider that deep down you are not who you think you are, and take the time to examine those reflective thoughts and work to change them, you will likely discover you are actually worthy and deserving of love, compassion, and acceptance, just like all of the other people that you care about in your life. That's it for today. Have a good week.